Good morning. Now, while you're turning to Exodus chapter 20, I'm going to hobble back there and grab that chair through this maze. Y'all need a little more tanglefoot up there, you know, that's not enough. All right, Exodus chapter 20. We just have come out of God telling the children of Israel that He's going to do something unique. He's already prescribed to them to make themselves sanctified. He's going to come down in 3 days, and that if they touch the mountain in a certain spot, that they're to die and they're to be ready. And now we come to chapter 20, and if you aren't familiar with what is contained within chapter 20 of the book of Exodus, it is the 10 Commandments. A lot of times we look at these, and it's a pun that you've all heard before, it's the 10 suggestions, and we all giggle and we all laugh, and we go, ha 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 ha, that's funny, and then we live like they're suggestions. Because they're written in such a way that when the Jew reads them in the Hebrew text, there is no equivocation. There is no, well, what God meant to say, what was this? Now, a lot of folks, if you deal with individuals who are not Christians, they're very quick to go, well, you claim those 10 Commandments are written by God. But do you know there are law codes that precede the 10 Commandments? Yes, because they're cultures that are older than the Jewish culture. There are some from 1900 BC. There are some from 1850 BC, the Akkadian, Sumerian, Ugaritic kingdoms. They all existed precursor to. And oh, by the way, Hebrew uses some of those words in their language. Yeah, so no big deal. English steals from every other language upon the earth. It's the hardest language in the world to teach grammar to because I before E except after C. What? Huh? Our alphabet is not spelled phonetically, is it not? No! Because X can sound like a C or Z. Who came up with that? So just because something precedes another thing does not mean that God doesn't command these to come out. And a lot of people go, well, the laws are almost identical. Well, they're not. One of the ones that most people like to compare it to is the law code of what we call Hammurabi, and from about 625 BC. And typically in the law codes of the ancient world, the commands are phrased as, if you will do X, then I will do Y. If you will obey me, then I will bless you. If you will sacrifice your children to me, then I will make sure you have good crops. See, that's how those law codes are written. The 10 Commandments are not written in that way. They are written with the absolute negation. And we'll talk about how Hebrew negates verbs, and they only do it in two ways. One is with a temporal no, and one is with an absolute no. And we have a problem with that because we use the word no for both temporal and permanent. If you look at the 10 Commandments, especially in Hebrew, it begins with the exact same adverb. Never. Not today. And so it begins with, you will never. We should clean it up by saying, thou shalt not. But if you were going to translate it literally, well, you will never, ever, 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 no. That's what it means. We go, well, thou shalt not, but maybe thou shalt. Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 6. And God spake these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness, or anything in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I am the Lord your God, and I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, But showing steadfast love, that word steadfast love would be the word for covenantal faithfulness, to thousands of those who keep my commands, or who love me and keep my commands. So we're going to look at the first two commands. And one of the places I went to develop the structure, and actually if you want to really teach the 10 Commandments to your kids, any of the catechisms of the Protestant church will kind of help, because it asks questions about, well, what does this command mean? What's the purpose of this command? Why does this command exist? What are the implications of this command? And it forces you to flesh it out. One of the things that when we first get to the 10 Commandments, though, we all like to ask is, do we have to follow them? Yeah, you do. Why do you have to follow them? Well, because the 10 Commandments are about relationships. The first 4 is about this relationship vertically between you and your God. The remaining 6 are about your relationship horizontally to you amongst your brother and sister in Christ. And to say, well, I know, but doesn't Paul say that the law was a tutor? Yes, and you have to understand, there are 2 aspects of the law. There is the ceremonial law, which distinguishes Israel from all other nations. Circumcision is one of the biggies in that one there. It was designed to set Israel apart, make them a unique people. It was the sign of the covenant. Doesn't mean you get to go sleep with your neighbor's wife because the 10 Commandments aren't relevant anymore. Why? Because it's about your relationship horizontally with one of the believers. And here's the thing. If you are not crushing 1 through 4, you will never nail 5 through 10. If you get 1 through 4 messed up, if you're not nailing 1 through 4, if you're not even accurate on 1 through 4, you can never say, man, I'm crushing these others. These are easy to do. And the fact of the matter is, the first one is the hardest one to do because of its broad scope in which it entails within everything of the life of the believer. Conversely, though, you may be nailing 5 through 10, but if you're not doing 1 through 4, you're not nailing 5 through 10. You must be balanced and consistent in all of them. So it marks the life of the believer. Why is that? Well, because when Jesus is asked, what is the law? What does he respond with? Matthew chapter 22, Mark chapter 12. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. These things the law and the prophets hinge on, right? That's the summary of the 10 Commandments. The first 4 is the all to God, and the neighbor as yourself is 5 through 10. It's kind of hard to be loving your neighbor while going, his wife is just yummy. Kind of hard, isn't it? Kind of hard to love the Lord your God while going, wished I had what my neighbor had. My neighbor just got a new truck. Yeah, I got a new truck too, but his is newer. It's got bells and whistles. Literally, bells and whistles. See, it's hard to have that relationship with God when we are violating these things. And so the summary of the 10 Commandments is what Jesus gives in Matthew chapter 22 and in Mark chapter 12. He pulls it forward into the New Testament. And these are the things which, if you break it down to the essence of what Christian faith really is, the 10, not if you follow them slavishly, but if you make them the priority, is really a synopsis of what the whole text get to. You will have no other gods before me, period. Not, it's okay occasionally to supplant me with your other gods. I understand. You've read Galatians. Said no verse ever. But when you look at the 10 Commandments, let's take a look here. You have a preface before you get into the 10 Commandments. It appears in verse 2. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of slavery. Now, this is not for those yokels that are at this time per se who are going to forget who God is in about 20 minutes and build a gold calf. Although they will. They're going to get this info and then they'll go, this is cute. I'd like a gold calf, please. Think about it. Even Moses' wife, on the way to Moses going to tell Pharaoh, I'm here to serve the one true God, decided she'd bring along a little extra artillery with her gods, and the angel of the Lord met Moses on the road going, I'm here to kill you if you don't get rid of those idols. The preface, I'm the Lord your God, who led you out of Egypt, is designed to remind the reader as to why you are to have no other God before him. I am the Lord your God, church, who delivered you out of the dominion of darkness into the dominion of light. This is why you will have no other God before me. And it's not a suggestion. It's in an absolute, in our way we would translate it is we would put it into imperatival force. It is an imperative. It's a command with extreme emphasis. The exclamation points would go on and on and on, and actually they go this way in Hebrew, and then this way, and then this way. That's how you would write it in English. Why is that? Because who were the children of Israel supposed to be relying upon for their defense, for their protection, for all of their needs? God himself. When they were out of food, who provided them food to eat? God did. With manna, sweet cakes that appeared like dew upon the ground, and the dumbest quail on the face of the earth. You could bag your... It's not like me going dove hunting where I expend 1,000 rounds to kill 6. I feel like an anti-aircraft gunner in Baghdad. Did you get one? I think that one died of a heart attack. No joke. One time I went with David and Raymond. I shot at one. Raymond shot at the same one. I think it died of a heart attack, but the three of us just... And then it landed in the water. And it was drifting towards me, and I was going to get it and go, ah! And just as I reached to get it, a turtle grabbed it and pulled it under, of which I emptied the tube of my shotgun into the water. I don't think I killed the turtle. I mean, these quail are so dumb, you just walk out and just pick them up. Bag your limit. You could actually go over your limit as long as you gave it to other people that were inept at picking up quail. I provided. When your back was against the wall at the Red Sea, and you were afraid that I was going to bring you out here for you to be slaughtered, I obliterated a nation's army with a water. I'm the Lord your God. I've delivered you. Look at your life today and look at all the times that the Lord your God has delivered you out of the hands of something at the moment when you go, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. And this is why you have no other gods before him. The preface sets the tone as how we are supposed to live. We are supposed to live as though we are solely dependent on the Lord our God for all the things that come to us, and as such we should never covet what our neighbor has, because it's God that blesses the neighbor and it's God that blesses you, and when you covet that you say, God is not a good God to me. That's why we don't do it. Ever. Never, ever, ever. You say, well, Pastor, we don't have gods today in the modern church. We don't have idols. We don't sit and we don't make them. I'll give you a minute to think that one through. There are churches today that have idols within them very well. They come to Sunday morning and they either experience one of two things. I have a friend, he's part of a different church. He's a rector down in, of a church, which means he's a minister down in a church in Austin. And this Sunday morning sermon is going to be about some type of political activism as to why the church needs to be involved in politics and why the church should stand up for X supporting group. Who's the God of that church? It's the God of activism. You got other churches that go so far the other direction that you come into the church and you can't tell whether or not it's the difference between a conservative political campaign and worship the one true God. It goes in both directions. Before my face is a polite way of translating something that's rather vulgar. Have you ever had a dog that did its business in the house, and or if you're the type that take the dog's nose and rub the dog's nose in the mess? So the dog knows what it smells like and knows not to do it again. Same phraseology. Your sin or your gods are right here in God's nose before him. Now we're brave about worshiping false things when we think God can't see it. Imagine, if you will, the first person of the triune God here, and you take your little idol and you come right up and go, "There you go, God, get you some of that. Get you some of that." Because that's what you're doing. We don't come into this house for any other purpose than to worship the one true God. We do not come into this house for any other reason than the corporate worship of the one true God. Which means our minds and our thoughts and all things that we come in here for should be held captive to its sole purpose of honoring God with our worship. Not the preference of our worship style, but the purpose of its worship. And when we make the preference of our worship style what drives our train, you have taken a God and rubbed it in the nose of God and said, "Get you some of that, God." But since it's not going to happen, right? God doesn't know about it. Think about that for a moment. But it's not simply when it's corporate. It's also personal. When you go into your house, you do not have things around your house that become gods that you worship. Money, time, family, land. In my case, it would really be guns. Lord, look at this cool gun I just picked up. It was an orphan. It needed my help. There was room in the safe. There's always room for a refugee firearm in my house. There we go. But that can become a god. Unchecked, that could be the sole thing that drives my life. And what I should be doing for the honor and glory of the Lord can be simply a means by which I do to obtain other things. Do you see how easy it is? It's also the hardest. Think about it. What does Jesus say? To love the Lord your God with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, with everything that is in you. This is encapsulated within the first commandment. And it's why it's the most difficult one to do, because it is so broad-based. It's the one that should be driving our train. Why? It has the primacy of being listed first. The Jews are pretty smart people. When the important ones are listed first, there's a reason for it. The guy's not like going, I think I just put it. He's not like, you've seen the difference between men shopping and women shopping, where men go in, get the thing, leave, and then women, and it's all over the map. He's not drawing all over the map. He's got a point. Pop, 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 pop. Nothing, whether corporately here as a body or at home personally in your worship and daily living to the Lord, is to supplant who He is in your life. And anything that does, you have now taken and you have rubbed it in the very nose of the God you claim you are here to worship. That's the language. I'm guilty of it. I would stare at saying that if I were to poll you all privately, and you were honest, you all have done it. The mark of a believer is, are you getting rid of all those things that hinder that? because it's not a suggestion. Do the best you can. It is not written suggestively. And we'll see here in a minute. And Daniel, you can go ahead and pop those slides up. We're going to look at some Hebrew here in a little bit. Don't worry, the little squiggly things, I'll tell you what they mean. And I've got a laser. I'm not going to point it in my eyes to let me know that it comes on, because I know that it will come on. They're not written suggestively. Do the best you can. Because the implication of it being written suggestively means that, well, I know I'm going to fail, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I've learned around some of my notes, so I'm going to catch up here. That's the first commandment. The second commandment is not a single command. It is two commands in one. We shall read the second commandment, and then we will look at it. You shall not make for yourself any graven image or likeness of anything in heaven, or that is in the earth, or that is in the water or under the earth. You shall not bow down to them. Now, this verse, you see the 4 right there? That is verse 4. Hebrew reads right to left, so we're going this way. Hebrew negates its verbs in 2 ways. An absolute negation and a temporal negation. Lo, right here, so we know it says lo because there it is, says up there in English. L-O, lo. This is a lamed, and that's an aleph. Lo is the absolute negation. Never, ever do it. Period. It isn't up for question. When a Jew reads this, they know God is not playing. Verse 4, never make for yourself any image, graven image. Now, the way that we have probably been taught this in the church is we don't make them for the purpose of worship. There is a way in Hebrew to write this to where it would say exactly what you just said, and that does not say that. That does not say, because that's an absolute negation, not a temporal. What you just gave me, that verse that you just gave me, well, you don't make them for the purpose of worshiping. That would be a temporal no attached to a permanent no. And Hebrew can do that, and I'll show you. Go to the next slide. This is verse 5 as indicated here. You see the exact same adverb. Lo, not, never, ever bow down to them. Now, the translation that we normally get is you don't make them for the purpose of worshiping does not fit with what the Hebrew here says. The Hebrew does not say you don't make them for the purpose of worshiping them. The Hebrew states you don't make them at all, ever, period. And see, what happens is, by stating, well, you don't make it for the purpose of worshiping, what you end up doing is allowing for them to be in existence. Well, I'm not making this to worship. That would be like an alcoholic saying, I'm going to have alcohol in my house, but I don't plan to drink it. And for a while, he may not drink it, but he will. See, we're sinaholics, okay? And when you're a sinaholic, you probably wouldn't put something in your life that helps you sin more. You make no image of God, ever, for absolutely no purpose. For the purpose of that, then becomes for that of worship. You know, well, we'll talk about that here in a minute. Now, if you wanted to write it, you can make them but you cannot worship them. Next slide. You would have to use that adverb. That's an aleph and a lamed. I hand wrote that. You can all clap now. That is a temporal no, which means not now or not for this purpose. And so in order to get well, you don't make them to worship them, you would have to see that in place of that. You do not make these for the purpose of worshiping them. That's how you would write that in Hebrew. Notice that's not how the Hebrew is written. What does that matter? I'm done with it. You can turn off. I know people that have pictures of Jesus Christ in their house. And I ask them every now and then, and I go, why do you have that picture? Oh, that picture's there to remind me. And one of them is there's a picture of Jesus protecting a lamb from 3 wolves. That picture is there to remind me that Jesus is there to protect me from the lamb. That's an idol. Why is it an idol? Because I need the picture to remind me of the faithfulness of God, not the second verse here in chapter 20. I am the Lord your God who delivered you out of the hands of the Egyptians. My daughters do not need a picture of me to tell you of my faithfulness to them, because they have a relationship with me. They're at that stage in life where Dad is Superman, and I'm loving it. Because I know very soon, Dad is super dud, and I won't be loving it. But because of the relationship I have with my daughters, they know that if I say I'm going to do this, then I am going to do that. And they don't have to have a picture of me going, this picture of my dad tells me that he will do as he says he would. Because now my faith is not in the God who delivers, but in the picture of the God who delivers. And here's the interesting thing about pictures about Jesus. Have you ever noticed that they seem to conform to the socioeconomic background of the people making them? I've seen a blue-haired, or blue-eyed, yellow-haired, fair-skinned Jesus. I've also seen an African-American Jesus. I can tell you that Jesus is neither white as snow or dark. He's Semitic. He's a Jew. He probably has some very olive-skinned features and has very Jewish nature. Notice how we tend to take Jesus and conform him to where we are. And when we begin to do that, we lessen who he is. Why? Because we are not being conformed to Jesus' image. We are now conforming Jesus to ours. And that's why it's an idol. Well, what about pictures in churches? Okay. Where do you fall on this continuum? Well, you got to understand, within church history, especially within Eastern Orthodox and Catholicism, when you walk into their sanctuaries from the back, especially their cathedrals, and one of the best examples of this is the Cathedral of Milan. Gorgeous stained glass, it's just tall, floor to ceiling tall. When you walk in and you look to your left, starting at the very top is the beginning of the creation narrative in stained glass, gorgeous stained glass, going all the way down in one column and ending in the floor and going all the way up to the next column, going all the way down, and going all the way down, and going all the way down. It goes all the way down, pane after pane after pane after pane after pane, all the way over to this side here that ends in the book of Revelation. And the reason why they do that is because how do you train a primarily illiterate populace the things of God? You do it through images. The Eastern Orthodox Church had another problem because at the time when the Byzantine Empire fell, which would be the center of the Eastern Orthodox Church, it fell to the hands of the Muslims. And so they, in order to maintain their ability to teach the Bible, because the Muslims would burn this book, but they would not destroy art. So the Eastern Orthodox Church did the same thing, and you have beautiful murals of the entire story of creation along the wall. I don't think that's what's being encompassed here, because its purpose was designed for teaching. Now, when you get into the Reformation, was Ulrich Zwingli. Zwingli said it's an image, it's a violation of the second commandment. And when you can go into certain sections of Switzerland, and you will know which sections were held by Ulrich Zwingli, because all the cathedrals are whitewashed. He painted it all over. Luther, on the other hand, held that the fact that you could still have a statue of Mary, you could have a picture of the crucifix, you could have a picture of Jesus, as long as he took the more mild version of, as long as you're not worshiping them, they're fine. Somewhere on that continuum is where I land. I'm not over here with the absolute Zwingli where we whitewash everything. Why? Because even here in our stained glass here, with the exception of Noah's Ark, which is out of order, but it should go right there, you have the Old Testament going right across here, going to the Ten Commandments, which is where we are today. And if you start right here, you had the birth of Christ going all the way back here to the crucifixion and the grave. We do the same thing with our stained glass. It's designed to be a teaching tool. Do I have images of Jesus Christ within my house? Yes, I do. And I will tell you why. My grandfather, my mom's daddy, when he died, left me a picture of Jesus upon a cross. He saved it from a Catholic church in Baltimore, went in, risked his life, grabbed it. It was the only thing he could get out of it. The priest gave him the picture. I'm the only minister he's ever known in his entire life, so he thought, minister, crucifix of Jesus, not really understanding my understanding of the second commandment, and said, left it to me in his will. It's in my house. You can come to my house and look all day long. That's not an invitation. I'm just telling you right now, she'll shoot you, and then after she's done shooting me. But if you were invited, and you came, you could look till the cows come home. You will never find it. I keep it out of a sentimental reason for my grandfather and nothing more. Do I have the picture of Michelangelo's Lord's Supper? Yes, I do. I have a fresco of it, which I bought in Milan and went to the place where it's at. And you wouldn't believe where it's at. It's in this like little tiny little hole-in-the-wall place. And it's gorgeous. But it's depicting a scene from the Bible. The picture of Peter or Jesus washing Peter's feet out here is not an issue. Why? Because it's depicting an actual teaching point of the Bible. It can be an idol for those that are here. So how do I use this passage? Why do I bring this up? What purpose is there in this absolute command? In order for you to honor God properly and worship Him as the one true God, do not dabble in the things that can become idols. Do not dabble in the making thereof them. Why? Because you end up violating the first and second command and breaking the relationship you would have with a one and holy true God. Because the image of whatever you make it is going to usurp the place of who you're to worship. In a little bit, they're going to make a cow. In a little bit, they're going to make a cow to worship. While Moses is speaking to the one true God. And they did so because they didn't think it was that big a deal to make something. Notice the command is two parts. It's you're not to make them and you're not to worship them. That way you can't pull this, well, we didn't make these idols, but we found them when we conquered the land of Canaan, so can we worship them? No! You fell asleep during the first part. I can't do that much more. I want to blow my voice out. Do you see how strict the relationship is this way? One way of looking at that is, well, you know, while I'm married to Stephanie, it's okay if I flirt with other women, right? Well, why not? I'm not worshiping them. And I'm not sleeping with them. I'm just flirting with them. It's harmless, isn't it? I asked Stephanie if it's harmless. I'm going to come home walking in on a roll of plastic and end up with a tent peg in my head. We had a discussion about that in Sunday school. If you weren't in our class, then you won't understand. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, actually, there is. Why? Because it would offend her. But I have no problem with it. Yeah, see, the relationship that we have with God is not about how comfortable you are with your sin, but how uncomfortable you should be as you worship a holy God. You will have no other gods that you rub in my nose ever. And so that you understand this, you don't ever make them. Ever. And you certainly never, ever worship them. Period. There is no equivocation in these commands. There is no wiggle room in these commands. There is no, well, what God meant to say, I popped up for you what the Hebrew said, and the Hebrew does not tell you you can go that direction. You say, well, I don't believe you. Okay, well, I've got my text in my office. We can go there afterwards, and we can take a look at it, and you both can look at mine I put up there. Because the relationship this way is to be in such that nothing ever impedes the relationship this way. So that when we get to the relationships that go this way, we can come together in harmony as Christians, brothers and sisters, and not have petty rivalries. Not have vain disputes. Not have jealousies over who gets what, or I don't like this, or this is not the way I like things to happen. Because we're not here to get, we're here to worship. And that's the point. And what happens is when we start having these little bickers, we don't have the proper understanding of the relationship this way because we're not paying attention to the relationship this way, which says, you worship me and me alone, period. You don't make anything that would impede that, period. And you don't worship anything that would impede that, period. That sounds kind of rough. It's kind of terse. Yes. Because he knows us. Up until the giving of this law, have the children of Israel been knocking it out of the park. Thanks, Brother Jim, for your laser. I'll give it back to you afterwards. After this, after he gives the law, do they knock it out of the park? We're in the book of Judges. For goodness sakes, these people have brain damage. But before we just look at them and go, those people have brain damage, folks, we have brain damage. See, we don't believe that our sin actually is rubbed in the nose of a holy God. That's the language. Let me ask you, how many sins would you commit this week if you knew that at the end of the week you had to come up to the, let's go first, second, or third. You make your pick. First, second, or third person of the triune God, and then you had to rub your sin in his nose. How long do you think that'd last for you? That's the thing about sin. We like to make it privately. But according to this, there's no such thing as private. This is designed for us and for the children of Israel to understand our relationship with God. And it begins with all must be laid bare. And we come to worship him in spirit and in truth. And lay aside all that hinders and all that entangles and all that holds us back. Otherwise, we're just like these people in the text. And the problem is, though, I can have pity on them. You know why? Because they're just now getting these. They're just now being told that these things are sinful. You all have known this for however long you've been a believer and been coming to church. I can see where they would have an excuse. I don't. Every time I sin, I know that I'm violating 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. I don't have an excuse. The great thing about grace is that it doesn't usurp these laws, but it covers us in spite of our breaking of these laws. That doesn't mean that we break the law expecting more grace. I believe Paul makes it clear with an absolutely not. And so while we are all lawbreakers, there is grace that comes to us that is given to us through the work of the Son who makes the law and has completed the law perfect. But that doesn't absolve us from the striving of the completion of it. You're here today. you've been contemplating joining Skyline Baptist Church and thought about being part of the wonderful body of faith here, I'd like for you to come down and chit-chat with me. I'll have my microphone turned off. You're here today and say, you know, I have lived a life where I have sought a God around every corner. I would like to know what it's like to have a relationship with a God in which I am totally and absolutely dependent upon in all things. I'd love to sit and talk to you about the wonderful love of a loving God who, while we are lawbreakers, yet sent his Son to make us right. As the praise band comes to lead us in singing, if you will please stand and sing with them.